Joining me now is senior editor at The Federalist, Fox News contributor, and author of the new book, Rigged, How the Media, Big Tech, and the Democrats Seized Our Elections. We've got Molly Hemingway here. Molly, thanks for coming on. Really, really appreciate it. I just want to begin with this.
It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. You know, I read as much as I could read to get ready for this. Maybe not all of it. But I want to say, here's an excerpt from the book, and I'm quoting. "It's almost impossible to find conclusive evidence of election fraud, particularly after ballots are counted. But that didn't mean the election had been conducted without widespread interference." And Molly, I guess with these Zuckerberg allegations, I mean, these guys tried to cook it up before it happened. That's the way it looks to me. Help me out, please.
Well, and one of the things that I thought was that was a great report leading up to this, and you were talking about where that money was targeted. It was really targeted toward Democratic cities and counties in swing states. So you see outsized funding in states that end up shifting from the Trump column in 2016 to the Biden column in 2020. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia. This was really targeted funding, and it mostly went to, it predominantly goes to these blue counties where they can squeeze votes out by putting these left-wing activists into the governmental election offices. And governmental election offices are not supposed to take sides. But through this disparate funding and through the way that they were targeting Democratic groups with that funding, it ended up making a huge difference in the election. Obviously, you can't have private, you can have tech oligarchs privately funding U.S. elections. So a lot of states are making it illegal. Governor DeSantis noted earlier this week that Florida had made the private takeover of government election offices illegal. But at the time it happened, nobody even imagined that such a thing could take place. And so they were able to kind of walk right in there and have really profound effects. The election came down to 43,000 votes across 3 states. So a little bit of changes in one state or another can have a profound effect on who is president, who controls the Senate, and how Washington, D.C. is run.
I love that, first of all, tech oligarch. I just love that. And I just wanted to ask you, have any other names surfaced? Your colleague Doyle, writing, I'm going to call it a companion article, it certainly supports the book, he referred to elites, plural, and I just wonder who else besides Zuckerberg, oligarch Zuckerberg?
I think we'll know a lot more about the other oligarchs and billionaires who were funding the operation. Mark Zuckerberg kind of went out there publicly, and it was really pitched as if it were this bipartisan or nonpartisan funding. Obviously, that's not true, because these grants were given to counties, and then it went out to a whole slew of left-wing groups that embedded into the system, that handled voter registration, ballot design, ballot translation, ballot harvesting, ballot counting, all sorts of legal issues. And it was all these left-wing, far left groups. They all have ties to the Obama administration or previous Biden, Biden ties. And so it was not even close whether those groups were neutral. They were all on the left. But there were, the whole thing was the establishment doing whatever it took to make sure Donald Trump couldn't get a second term. And so it was kind of all hands on deck.
Well,
the book deals not just with this issue, but also with how laws were changed in states throughout the country to make it possible to flood the zone with tens of millions of mail-in ballots and drop the scrutiny that was applied to them.
Going around legislatures. In fact, in many cases, not even consulting legislatures.
Right. So you're supposed to, according to the Constitution, the legislature is in charge of that. Frequently, that didn't happen at all. You would have these Democratic law firms and their allied groups sue a friendly Secretary of State and get them to settle and agree to these really profound changes in election laws. And it creates this whole mess, where you don't even know how many votes are outstanding. You don't know who's monitoring the ballots. You don't know if the ballots are being taken care of properly. It's just messy. And the messiness is the design. That's what the Democratic Party actually wants to make it, so that you can litigate everything and you can challenge everything and you can't really know what's going on. And that's the issue going on now, is that a lot of citizens are saying, we need to tighten this up, we need to clean this up. This is no way to run a country.
Molly Hemingway, I want to ask you this. I'm going to ask you your opinion, your judgment. As I'm reading your stuff and thinking about this, I think the arguments you're making that the oligarchs set this election up and bought it ahead of the voting day is a stronger argument. I mean, President Trump is saying there was fraud on election day and the vote counting was wrong. But you're making a different statement here, that I like to call it bought or influenced, was done ahead of time. And I just wonder whether you've talked to President Trump or suggested that line of reasoning.
I don't make suggestions to politicians, but I have talked to him about what happened in 2020. I interviewed him extensively for the book, along with all sorts of other people on the campaign, at the RNC, and otherwise. I think he actually understands these issues. He told me he thought Zuckerberg should be in jail for what he did. And what he meant by that was not just the private funding and takeover of government election offices, but also what big tech oligarchs did to suppress information, to violate the freedom of information that we have as Americans, to know what's going on. You know, it was about controlling algorithms, deplatforming effective conservative voices. These are all such important issues, and you can't have a free and fair election or an honest election when you can't even know what the issues are in play. And because of our media environment and tech environment, it's very hard for Americans to actually know, what's going on. What they were told was true about Biden is very different from the reality that we're dealing with now, and it's all because of media and tech suppression and interference.
Molly, I just before we go, because it's wonderful to have you, I want to walk through another chain reaction here. John Durham's investigations are beginning to bear fruit. So Mark Elias, himself a pretty good election fixer, on the Hillary Clinton payroll, as well as his law firm. His, I'm going to call it assistant or whatever, colleague, Michael Sussman. Then we go to this Alpha Bank stuff, and the Alpha Bank is financing this phony study. They find Christopher Steele, some kind of phony diplomat. Anyway, they make up stories, lies and stories, and sold it to the FBI and the media. Now, this caused President Trump, I was there for 3 years. It caused him much angst and wasted of time. Does anything happen here? It looks like these people are finally getting fingered.
Okay, let me first say that one of the things I thought was really interesting, and I report on this in Rigged, is that Mark Elias was the guy who kind of handled the Russia lie. That was the lie that Donald Trump planned to steal the 2016 election by colluding with Russia, and then it became the lie that he had stolen the 2016 election by colluding with Russia. That was Mark Elias and his partner Mark Sussman. That was also Mark Elias who did the manipulation of, all the changes to voting laws in states throughout the country. It's the same operation. And so I think that's reason alone to be suspicious about what the plan was to change voting laws. I am very much heartened by the fact that Michael Sussman was indicted, that the Durham probe does seem to understand that there were all sorts of different bad actors. It wasn't just the FBI agents who weaponized the fake information from the Clinton campaign, but it was that the Clinton campaign really harmed the country by inserting these lies into the discourse. It was a meddling in the election. This was something that had profound negative consequences for the country, undermined the administration, really put us at risk of, nuclear war or other problems with other countries. And no one's really been held accountable. And so I'm hoping that more will happen here.
All this GPS fusion stuff, all these rumors and lies that somehow Trump, before he became President Trump, was in bed with Putin or Russians, they all turned out to be lies. The whole thing is a hoax. And it was bought by the media and the FBI, Molly. That gets the hair on my neck up. Really, the whole thing was false, just false. And I just think somebody should pay for this. And on top, I'm saying that your sin about Zuckerberg, the oligarch, and what he did pre-election, I'm still hanging on to this combination of sins, which proved to be completely false. There was no quid pro quo. There was no anything.
Well, and to me, it's all related again. We had these years of lies about the, whatever you think about the Trump family, they did have a legitimate, they do have a legitimate global business in real estate. And you had teams of reporters digging into everything, and you had them all repeating these lies about collusion with Russia. And they were really dangerous and false lies. And then you had, at the same time, no scrutiny of the Biden family business, which, near as we can tell, is that you give members of the Biden family money because of how close they are to Joe Biden, and it's very unclear what they get in return. That's an issue that Americans should care about, because presumably what they get in return has something to do with American foreign policy or other, taxpayer money, and yet journalists suppressed that story, really horrifically, dramatically suppressed that story, refused to cover it. Big tech came in and deplatformed people who tried to share it, and this was just after making up all these lies and sharing them and giving each other awards for sharing these lies about the 2016 election.
Give them all Pulitzer Prizes. They ought to hand back the Pulitzer Prizes. Folks, Molly Hemingway, the name of the book is Rigged. I think it's all bombshell stuff, Molly. Congratulations. Sell a million books.
Thank you.
Talk soon.